We are going to be in Luke chapter 15 this morning. So if you want to grab your Bible and turn there, be a great thing to do. My students in my Bible classes often are shocked when Mr. Wagner says, "Who brought their Bible?" Because I'm putting 10 points in the grade book for everybody who brought their Bible this morning. And some of them freak out because they forgot to bring their Bible to Bible class. But we help you out here. There's a Bible right in front of you in the pew. If you need to grab one, you can hold it up and get 10 points this morning. Steve will record that. If you get to a bonus 1,000, we're going to put your name on the pew that you always sit in anyway. I'm glad somebody finds me funny. We're still looking at these parables that Jesus tells as he really confronts the religious, the Pharisees, as he's just about to hand himself over to be crucified. And these parables that he uses that are recorded here in Luke for us, I think are really supposed to challenge our thinking, especially as we remember that we are gathered here this morning and we are the religious. That's difficult for us. And the parables that we're going to look at this morning might challenge us a little bit. There are 3 stories, some that are very famous that you'll immediately remember. There's the story of the lost sheep, the story of the lost coins, and the story of the lost son. And Jesus tells them here in Luke chapter 15. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear him. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. "Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Does he not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, 'Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep.' I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Does she not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, 'Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin.' In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents." Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. "Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in, so his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I have been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because your brother, this brother of yours, was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." A long time ago, so long ago I can't really believe it's true, two young parents took their two baby girls to the zoo. One was 3 and one was 2. And these young parents, as the mom pushed the stroller and the dad walked with the 3-year-old holding his hand, they made their way through everything. The tigers were quite the letdown. The lions were asleep. Most of the animals weren't really interesting. And we said, let's go look at the polar bears, because they're always fun. They're Shauna's favorite. So here we walked in to view the polar bears. I opened the door. Blackness was on the other side of the door. Shauna pushed the stroller in, McKenna following right behind. I held the door open for another family as they came out, and then I joined Shauna inside. As the door shut, if you've ever been there, it's so dark as your eyes begin to adjust. And I saw Shauna up by the glass, the stroller, and walked up and said, "Where's McKenna?" There are only 2 doors in that room. Shauna went out one, I went out the other. I made my way around that entire area 3 times in a panic. I found Shauna. She was barely holding it together, tears about ready to burst. Liddy asleep in the stroller, oblivious to everything. In the panic, I was just seconds away as I made one more loop around from demanding that they close the entire zoo until my baby girl was found. And I came upon a mother with her own stroller, her own children, and an extra. I resisted the urge to yell at that sweet child and just picked her up, tried to contain my own fear and anxiety and stress, and carried her back to her mother, who didn't let go of her the rest of the day. If you're a parent and you have had that experience, you are ready to hear these parables of Jesus. If you are not in that state of shock and panic, worry, anxiety, you do not understand what Jesus is saying. He's answering a question that no one asked him. He is in this party, the same one that we left last week in Luke 14. And he's answering a question no one has asked. Why does Jesus spend so much time with these sinners? Luke puts it in quotes to highlight the reality of their sinfulness and how notorious they are. Jesus, in the presence of religious, of Pharisees, teachers of the law, and sinners. And the Pharisees and teachers of the law, of course, want to know, why would a righteous man be so consumed with the needs of these sinners? And Jesus tells 3 stories that make no sense. I don't know about you, but if I have 100 sheep and I lose one, I'm concerned about the 99. Right? That one dumb sheep. No, this shepherd leaves the 99 in open country. I'm not a shepherd. We do sheeping and herding differently in our country. We put up fences. But for Jesus, he says the shepherd goes and looks for the one. And when he finds it, he invites his friends and neighbors to celebrate with him. I have found my sheep. Come and rejoice with me. I understand the next story because I'm an American. And so when we lose money, we look for it. Do you know what I found on my way to work this morning? I got there before Karen made her rounds. Karen, you probably didn't make your round around the campus yet, right? Well, you're out of luck. I found $5. You're not getting it. I was on my way to work and I thought, well, there's some trash and we have to have this habit of picking. And I go over, it wasn't trash. It was a dollar bill. And I thought, well, that's funny. And then I walked a little more, another one, and another one, and another one. And I was excited. I got a bonus today. We can understand lighting a lamp and searching the house until you find that money. It was probably in her couch the whole time. But the point of the story is she calls her friends and neighbors and says, rejoice with me. I've found my lost coin. In both instances of this story, Jesus reminds the religious listening, there is more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who comes home. And then he tells the story that is not about the prodigal son. I'm convinced of that. Very little attention is played to the younger brother. The real conversation happens between the older brother and the father. Yeah, we know the story of the prodigal. And he goes off and he squanders and he ends up in a bad situation. We know that story. But the reason I believe that it is about the older brother is because when he comes home and he finds his father rejoicing in this party with music and dancing and celebrating happening, he won't go in. And the father has to come out and meet him. And the son confronts his father and he says, that son of yours, with accusation, all of a sudden makes it about injustice. He's never been given even a goat to celebrate with his friends. And the father tries to redirect and he says, the brother of yours. Doesn't call him his son. He says, your brother has returned. And we had to celebrate. Do you hear what Jesus is saying? Can you hear it? The panic of a shepherd, of a woman, of a father. And the condition of his lost son. And the celebration that must happen when children come home. When you find your baby and you hold them in your arms, you can't help but celebrate. Right? It is far too tempting for those of us who are in this room to make us the sheep, the coin, and the lost son. That's how we like these stories. Then you are not hearing Jesus. The point of these stories is the lack of celebration in the hearts and minds of the religious over the lost sinner who is found. That's the story Jesus is telling. We like to try to remind ourselves that we were once lost and we were then found. We like to tell those stories and make ourselves the point of the rescue of Jesus. Now, there's nothing wrong with remembering that we were once lost and we have been found. But if you want to hear what Jesus is saying, you need to remember that the point is you were invited now to be among the celebrators, among the rejoicing, among those eager to join God in what He is doing. That's the point of these stories. Most of us don't remember very well the utter sense of loss that we used to have. Most of us are oblivious to what's happening around us. Most of us are amazingly blessed. Most of us are safe and warm and well-fed and taken care of, and we're just, fat sheep. We're the 99. Sorry if that's somewhat offensive, but it's just true. We're not the notorious sinner. I know. I was in that class too, and God looks at all sin the same. But we're not talking about God's perspective here. We're talking about human perspective, and Jesus is trying to reorient it. He's trying to get you to see things differently. Because if we were really honest with ourselves, church, we don't look at sin all the same. If we did, when I issue an invitation to confess sin, you'd be coming. Because you'd be concerned about it. But you're not. Oh man, I'm watching Ivory's face light up. It's just true, church. We don't treat all sin the same. We don't see it that way. So even if God does, we don't. And we're the point of this story. Our attitudes and our response to the person seeking, the person who's lost, the person that God is anxious about, the one He's worried over and concerned about and searching for. And we don't have the same feeling. That's the point of these stories. From God's perspective, there are a lot of lost sheep. And when one is found, do we rejoice? I would even ask this question. This one's hard. Would we demand of our elder shepherds that they devote most of the resources of this church towards seeking the lost and celebrating when they're found? Would we demand that? Yes. You may have to rewrite the budget bill because it's not true. At least not yet. It could be. Should be. And Jesus is asking us in these stories, do we understand that we have been invited to celebrate the return of that which was lost but has been found? Because the example that Jesus has provided for us, the example that God is calling us to, is the condition of the lost around us. And no expense was spared. The treasure of heaven was sent. That's the language of the New Testament. The treasure of heaven, Jesus the Son, was sent. And when Jesus encounters the religious, the righteous, who were indignant, that he would be so consumed with being in their presence, allowing them to push in and touch him, that he would spend so much of his effort on them instead of on the righteous. He tells these stories. And the point couldn't be clearer in all three. Sheep found, friends and neighbors invited to rejoice. Coin found, friends and neighbors invited to rejoice. Son found, household rejoices. But the climax is the older brother who won't come in. And there's no resolution to the story. Did you ever notice that? Doesn't say the older brother repented, heard his father's words, confessed that his heart was not in the right place, and asked his father to forgive him, and went in and hugged his brother and joined the party. There is no resolution. Except for maybe today. Because the point of Jesus' story is, do you hear? Do you understand? And so, church, the invitation this morning is quite simple. Can you resolve the story? Can you dedicate yourself to recognizing that you are the found, who has become the righteous, who has been invited to follow in the steps of Jesus, and who will go in and join the party? And I think we need to pray that God would do that in our midst, and He would transform our hearts and our thoughts and our minds and our thinking. And that we would turn to our elder shepherds and say, release the treasure of heaven in search of the lost, and help us be better at rejoicing. And if you're here this morning and you realize, as you listen to these words of Jesus, that you're the sheep that's gone astray, or you're the coin that has been lost, or you're the brother who has squandered your inheritance, the gift of Jesus, the kingdom of God, and you need the prayers of this church so that you can confess and claim Jesus again, or maybe for the first time, to participate in His death, His burial, and His resurrection, then this invitation is for you. But I would pray that we would hear the words of Jesus this morning, and that we would celebrate the gift of God, the grace of Jesus. If you have any need this morning, would you please stand and come forward and let